And tonight we're actually, well, as much as possible, we're going to look at a couple of things that people brought up last time, which was the questions around the why tea is so important in the Zen context. And the other thing was, what is the point of the stick that Zen masters carry? So we'll just touch on those things, and then we'll move on and briefly discuss a Zen poem, but then we'll spend our time really today looking at some haiku and some Zen haiku. And look, it's just not enough time to do it all. And I was hoping I could do some, go across the oceans to America and pick up on some of the beat poems, but I don't have time. And so what I'm suggesting is if people are interested to continue this sharing, then let's make a decision to do this on maybe every month or every couple of months, so that it becomes a common, something that we have in common. And it isn't always necessary that I am there to run it, that each person will have their own particular flavour that they can bring to those gatherings, but I would try to be there as much as possible, because I think it's very enjoyable. Well, for me, it's very enjoyable. And I know that many of you do have some poetic inclinations, and I think that that's wonderful. And I'd really like to be able to be on the receiving end and have some participation. So one part of tonight, I want to have a look at some poems that have been sent in from last week, and I'll actually be asking the people who sent them to do a bit of a presentation about their own offerings. So we've got a number of things tonight, and let's hope that we can get to it. And if I'm looking, Bronwyn, say by 5 to 8, if I'm looking like I'm still sort of in full swing, can you just tell me? Because I really would like to leave sufficient time for people to be able to share their poems and have some discussion around that. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this screen down so I can see the PowerPoint. And so tonight, so I'll just bring this up, I'll begin. Okay, so I just wanted to start with a comment about Zen generally. And so we say everything is Zen, and sitting, walking, playing. And I just thought this was a lovely photo here of a Theravada monk speaking from the Zen perspective and saying you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes each day. Unless you're too busy, then you should sit for an hour. So that's the Zen wisdom. Just moving on now. Last time we were, I mentioned the stick that Zen masters and other leaders in the Zen halls we carry when we're leading the practice. I just start with this one. There are two things in this picture which are very very core to the Zen culture, and these of course are the stick that the monk is carrying, the Zen stick, and also the little teacup on the stand there. So this is another photo of this, and this is actually I'll just go back there. This is my teacher, Zen Master Songfan, who passed away in about 2005, and so he was actually recognised as Zen Master when he was in his early 20s, and he became quite a well-known teacher who developed Zen centres all around the world. He went to live in America in the 60s and 70s when all of the Asian, particularly the Northern Asian influence and the Tibetan began to make some impression on the Western mind. And so you see his stick. So actually when he was when his enlightenment was recognised in the traditional way that it is in Korea, then he was actually told to go and find find they cut down their own limb and then carve it and oil it and things. So here you see the stick again, and this is being used in a very traditional way in the Zen hall during the meditation, long meditation practices. And what you see here is this master here has actually put 2 bamboo sticks together. And so he's actually, when we're sitting like that, he will come round or she will come round once in every hour, and you will indicate if you want to be struck on your shoulders or on some particular points on the back. And it's used really to reduce the build up of stuff when you're sitting, to release the flow of energy again. And so what this monk is doing here, that's an indication. So he's indicating that he wants to be hit, and he's indicating that in his position, I would say, on this part of the back. I don't know whether you can see my finger there. So that's another major way that it's used. But Zen masters, of course, are very famous for flinging the stick around and when they're giving talks and having interviews with students. So we'll leave the stick now and move on to tea. And so mindfulness, of course, is an essential part of the Zen mind. And so tea is right from the beginning of the development of Zen. Tea became a really essential part of the life, the daily life of Zen and of Zen practice. And so it's used as several other things are in the Zen tradition, such as calligraphy and floral arrangement. Excuse me. These things are used as a form to really, they're used in a ritual way to help to develop this mind of stillness and mindfulness. This bowl here is very beautiful, actually. I think this is very traditional. It's not necessarily old, but it is a very traditional handmade tea, a bowl we call it, but it's like a small cup. And there's so much beauty really in the handmade bowls. And actually the Japanese, they believe that they would much prefer a bowl that's not perfect, that's a little bit chipped, maybe a little bit cracked, perhaps the glaze is a little bit uneven. They see this as the beauty of the bowl, in the sense that they recognise the effort that a human being has put into making this vessel. And this is there's some of these bowls that are imperfect are actually very, very valuable, as a collector's item and item to have specially drink tea from. Here we see this is green tea, making green tea from powder. And so in the 8th century, the first Zen master in Japan, so he went, the monks used to go from Japan and Korea at that time to China, because that's where Chan began. And so the masters were there. And so they used to go and study with the masters in the Zen halls. And this Zen master Isai was the first Zen master to come back. He was Japanese, and he'd gone to China to study, and he came back to Japan and became the first Zen master of Japan. And he also brought with him this powder tea. And the recipe of how to make it, and you make it with hot water in a bowl, and you use a special tea whisk. And so in the Chinese, we talk about this way of tea as cha do, cha being tea and do being the way. In Korea, we say da do, same meaning. So the way of tea is very integral to the Zen path. And let's see what we've got next. So Bodhidharma, we met Bodhidharma last week, and I'm sure many of you know about Bodhidharma prior to that. But actually, there are two things here. One I'll talk about now, and this picture is also something that's has a Zen message in it, but I'll talk about that just a little in a minute. So it's said, as the story goes, that Bodhidharma, who of course was the first patriarch of Chan, so he came from India to China, and he bought what was called dhyana, and when you translate the dhyana meditation, it becomes Chan in the classical Chinese language. And so he used to sit, he went to Shaolin, and the story says that he went and sat in a cave and faced the wall for 9 years. And he was very impatient with himself. And, he sometimes, of course, as human, we struggle to stay awake hours and hours and hours. In the Zen temples, even in my time, we used to sit at least 16 hours a day. And that was, you had to maintain some degree of awakeness, and that was how the stick was used sometimes. If you nodded off, it was just used as a prompt to straighten up at least. And of course, many monks and nuns, learn to sleep with a rigid spine so that they don't, they're not picked up by the meditation hall leader of that time. So it said that Bodhidharma was struggling to stay awake, and so he ripped off his eyelids. And you can see in this picture here, and in many pictures of Bodhidharma, he has this really open, startled eye look. And so it said that so that he didn't nod off, he ripped off his eyelids. And the story goes that out of these eyelids, he threw them, I guess, in the dirt on the ground, and so the discarded eyelids sprouted tea plants, which is quite a lovely story. So this other thing with the picture, of course, this picture of Bodhidharma, hold your applause to one hand, of course, is the making the reference to one hand clapping, which is, a Zen koan. Okay. So this is also a very famous saying in Zen, have you washed your bowl? And here we have a little story of the washing the bowl and drinking tea. And so a young monk travelled a long way to ask a famous Zen master, what is the meaning of Buddha? And the Zen master replied, have you washed your bowl? And the monk said, yes. And the Zen master said, then go and drink tea. This is a very famous, also a very famous koan. So I won't unpack it for you if you want to have some discussion later about it, but you may well understand the inference here of the Zen master. Okay, and so there was another Zen master also. He was, it was Nanin, a Japanese Zen master during the Meiji period, and he received a university professor who came inquiring about Zen to his temple. This is not uncommon. You know, when I was living in Korea with my master there in the meditation in the monastery, then not unusual that academics would come from the university and want to have Dharma combat with Song San Sunim, and so they would sit at his feet and try to outwit him from an academic, a knowledge base, and Song San Sunim would quickly, kind of cancel them out, and they would come back the same ones time after time after time. I guess it was while it was they really didn't make any headway with it. I guess it was a very creative experience for them. And so this is a similar instance, whereas a university professor comes to inquire of Zen Master Nanin about the meaning of Zen. And so Nanin invites him in and he serves him tea. And as he's pouring the tea, and the visitor's cup just becomes closer and closer to the brim, and then pours over. The master is still pouring as the cup is running over. And the professor, he couldn't, he watched the overflow until he couldn't restrain himself any longer. And he said, the obvious to the Zen master, it's overfull, don't need any more. No more will go in. And the Zen master said, like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? And again, this is a very seminal teaching in Zen, and it illustrates that if you want to learn, it requires an open mind, and the first essential step is to empty your cup or empty your mind. And in this regard, we talk about beginner's mind and holding nothing. So this is the story, I guess, that began in that way. Another story, a very famous Zen master Joju, who I'm sure some of you have heard of, Daozu in the Chinese, and he was very famous, but he chose to live in a wooden hut in the mountains, as many of them did. But he still had many, many visitors, coming and knocking at his door and wanting to know how to attain enlightenment. And one day there were two seekers. They came to his hut and they were begging for wisdom. And so Joju invited them in, and he asked them just to sit at the table where he and another monk were having tea. And the first visitor said to him, please tell me the meaning of Buddha. And Zen Master Joju says, drink some tea. And the second monk also asked, what is the meaning of Buddha? And the monk said to him, and the Zen Master said, again, why don't you drink some tea? And the old monk who was sitting there at the table, he began to wonder. He thought to himself, why isn't Joju answering their questions? Why is he telling them to drink tea? And Joju read the monk's mind and said to him, you drink tea too. Well, it's Zen master. Zen masters can read minds, sort of. So, let me just, sorry about this. Okay. Yes, I don't know. I didn't put anything particularly there. Here we have, this is, actually there's they're bhikkhuni women monks, and they're actually sitting on a platform that goes right round the Zen meditation hall in Korea. And so the inner part of that is the Zen hall, where we only ever meditate. It's a special hall. We don't do ceremony in it. We go to the main Buddha hall to do the ceremony. And during the long 3-month retreats that we do, we spend our life really in this meditation hall, eating, sleeping, meditating, drinking tea. And so it's actually a winter retreat here. You can see the snow on the ground, although you can see some spring blossom coming. So it's actually the winter retreat period. And winter retreat in Korea, and no doubt in China and Japan, is a very beautiful time because the snow is deep on the ground, and so there's a stillness. And often, and most of the temples where the meditation halls are in the mountains, so you can't go anywhere anyway. So you're here in this beautiful environment, this very natural environment, and you're just practicing, and you're observing the changing of the seasons. And so here, all of the bhikkhunis, they're sitting out here holding up their teacups. And usually in the meditation halls, every morning, after we've had our first practice, which is a 3-hour meditation sitting, after that, we all go to the tea room and we drink tea together and have, usually, there's the master or the, one of the senior practitioners who, will tell stories or give some wisdom at that time. So it's an opportunity not only to hear the Dharma, but it's an opportunity to enjoy the tea and the fragrance of the tea, and to think about the meeting of the water and the tea leaves, and to be with others as we drink the tea. It's together and enjoy the nature. And so this is the practice of tea, of drinking tea. Of course, there are formal tea ceremonies, and we participate in those. But tea is also, it's just part of the day, really. Many times in the day is punctuated by tea. And whenever anyone comes to visit the temple, the first thing you do in greeting is invite them to come and drink tea. And the tea is made in a very ceremonial way, and it's a ceremony. We're not as in Korea. We're not as formal, as rigid as the Japanese. It's still a very it's kind of relaxed, but it is it's a time when people are silent and really concentrating on some particular gestures and ways of making tea, and for those who are present, receiving tea, and then the drinking of the tea. It's a ritual. And the etiquette of drinking tea. So there's an old saying that drinking alone, one reflects. Drinking with another is an opportunity for discussion. And drinking with 2 or more other people affords the opportunity to practice etiquette. And so this is I've described in this group activity. So it's also a delight to the senses. Drinking tea is done with full utilisation of all 5 senses. We listen to the sound of the water boiling. We smell the fragrance. We see the beautiful colour of the tea in the teacup. And we taste the tea. And then we feel the enjoyment of the warmth of the tea as we drink it from a very beautiful teacup. And the instruments and objects that are used in the tea ceremony are all exquisite. They're crafted, traditionally handcrafted, from bamboo and from pottery and from, all the grasses of grass mats, and there's always the beautiful calligraphy around. It is a very delightful sensory experience. Okay, so now we're just going to leave the tea and move on to something else. But I just want to stop for a minute and just see if there's anyone who wants to share anything. I'll just come back into the group tiles and just take a breath for a minute before I move on to a different topic. Anyone want to ask anything or make a comment? No? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to take a couple of breaths because I've been really running all day. And we're going to then move on to just to have a look at it at a Zen poem, because I think this is interesting to understand a little bit about the way of Zen poetry, really. I'm just going to take this down again. So this is actually a poem by Musong, who was actually a student of the same master I was. He was a much older student, had been with Zen Master Songsun for a long time, but he was an exquisite poet. And he wrote this poem, "Moon is moon and trees are trees. On the other hand, moon and trees are not what they seem to be. Learning to move between the two, we delight in the dance of life. At the ultimate heart of the body and at the heart of the universe, there is no solidity, there is only the dance." So this poem has a number of aspects to it, which are very strongly associated with the Zen understanding. And so what you see here is the moon is moon and trees. So here we have the dualism, the conditioned and the ultimate. Then on the other hand, moon and trees are not what they seem to be. So here comes the sense of the change of impermanence, that things are shifting and changing, and then learning to move between the two, we delight in the dance of life. And so this is pointing to the importance of having a very a very supple mind, that we don't get stuck in our thinking, and nor do we get stuck in the sense of the universal. So to be able to move, have that flexibility, and that's a training in itself. And in this way, we can move between the two with ease, and this is the delight in the dance of life, really. And of course, the ultimate heart of the body and the heart of the universe, there is no solidity, there is only the dance. Well, I think it's quite a beautiful poem, actually, and very it does actually demonstrate something very particularly about how to train the mind. Now with haiku, first I want to ask you, what do you see in this picture here? Please speak to me. What do you see?
First impression, sorry. First impression is a bird.
Okay.
Maybe a hummingbird.
Okay. Anyone else?
It could be a soup ladle.
Soup ladle, okay. Anything else? No, I tell you, this is a one of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, actually from a long time ago, one of his teachings that I heard. So it points out the bleeding obvious once you actually know, you understand what you're looking at here. But in the meantime, we all jump to the figure. And so, you know, we never mention the space around it. You know, all we see, our mind just goes, you know, very directly to the object.
Yeah, to the surface.
Yeah, the form.
Not the emptiness.
That's right. And so we go form and we give it a name. And this is the way that the mind, you know, really, you know, generally operates without the training. This is the way that we see the world. So we're always concentrated on the particular, and we're not really seeing the peripheral, what's around it. And that's, you know, that's really the, you know, one of the main causes of the suffering of the mind, is that we, you know, we really fix in, and then we find it difficult to actually expand and to see anything else. And so this is actually a really good training, and this is what haiku can help with. So haiku poetry is really, you know, it has the ability really to help you to train this more supple mind. And so haiku is actually, the word hai means comic or light-hearted, and it suggests, you know, high-spirited play. And it's not necessarily very serious, but it is serious. It's deadly serious. But, you know, the language and imagery that it uses is often, you know, playful, interesting, and often quite reckless, spontaneous. And it is, you know, the way that the form of it is what we call a collocation. It's a three-part conception, which makes up a flash, a recognition, and a communing. And it challenges our habitual grasping and concept-forming mind. So in this sense, as we go through some of these poems, to see if you can keep this in mind a little. It's a brief moment and provocative often. And, you know, there's try when you're reading haiku, not to concentrate so much on, you know, understanding each word and you know, in the traditional way of making meaning, is just to try and absorb with the whole of your being the poem, and resist the, you know, the pull to really break it down and you know, dissect it and you know, try to understand it with the usual frame of mind. It's a form that cuts through. It's often juxtaposing two positions, two images, and I just want to take that down for a minute, and using a cutting word to break through. This word is often like a verbal punctuation mark, a moment of separation, and separating the juxtaposed elements. And it expresses in many ways. Haiku can also be expressed in image and in line drawings, calligraphy, music, movement. It doesn't have to be a written form. Here we have a very famous poem by really the very famous poet who we looked at briefly last week, Basho. And of course he he is known really as the the greatest of the haiku poets. Have a look again at this poem, and this an old silent pond. A frog jumps into the pond. Splash. Silence again. So we have to remember with the haiku that we that we have access to. It's been translated into English, as it's been translated into many languages, and so the original haiku in the language of the creators, you had the syllables and the consonants, verbs, etc. They were, they had a meaning in themselves in terms of, this juxtaposition and cutting through, etc. But even though it's translated into English, I think this poem still holds something of that, the power of that haiku form. And so what you see here is, in the first line, an old silent pond. And so in a Zen sense, we can think of this as space, this water, this pool that is, transparent and it's silent. So it has this quality of space, of emptiness, and the unconditioned, the unborn, in a sense. It's primordial, it's deep and it's profound in a way. A frog jumps into the pond. Then you see this frog, the frog is young. The pond is old, been there forever. And then this little frog comes and jumps into the pond, this exuberance, and makes this huge splash. And then there's silence again. And isn't it a bit like how we go about, living in the world? We come into this world, into this, nature around us, and it's been here, kind of forever. Certainly the longest forever that we could think about. And, it's seen so much, and it's, seen the comings and goings, and it's, it's kind of has a wryness about it, and it's seen so many of, the little frogs come and jump into the pond with a splash, eager to make a mark. And then, of course, as quickly as they've come, they've disappeared, just as we do. Life is short, and we're here a moment, and then we're gone. And the silence again is heard. So it's interesting this is actually Basho, of course, was Japanese, a Japanese Zen master, as I spoke of last week, and the word that is used for splash in the Japanese is has an onomatopoeic sound, which is the sound of a frog jumping in the water. So we can't actually, we can't equivocate that in terms of the language. But for myself, when I read this poem, I can actually hear and sense, experience that frog jumping in with the splash. So even in another language, it can have the power. So here we have a picture, calligraphic illustration of Basho, sitting quietly under the tree with his staff and enjoying the nature. And this is again one of his poems, awakened at midnight by the sound of the water jar cracking from the ice. So again, the images are so immediate. You know, that's what I love about haiku, and I love about Zen, is that, you know, it's so direct, it's experiential, it's intimate, and, you know, it has its roots in the common everyday experiences of life, of people and events. And it has no pretensions, really. It's, you know, even now this word I can't say, deprecatory, you know, but
Yes.
yeah, making you know, fun of oneself. It's a wryness, a poignancy, and you know, and it's for everyone. It's not, you know, it's not for the learned necessarily. You know, you don't have to go to university to study it. You just have to have an openness of mind and a willingness to be present to it, and it works its magic, really. And you know, it respects you know, the Zen form, the haiku form. They respect the ordinary wisdom of the everyday experience and the everyday people. And you know, it has a relational element, and especially, of course, in many of you know, the poems, the Zen and the haiku for centuries. You know, the relationship, there is a very intimate relationship with the natural environment.
Excuse me, Sunim.
Yeah, we're coming up to the end. Are we? Yeah.
It's a couple of minutes before 8.
Thank you very much. I'll try and do it a bit. So Koyabashi Isa, we spoke of last week, and here is another one of him. And a picture of drinking tea alone every day, the butterfly stops by. And his poem, even in Kyoto, hearing the cuckoo's cry, I long for Kyoto. Isa always, you know, a lot of his poetry has this yearning, you know, this longing quality. This is actually another, this poet, Masako Shiko, was a very famous poet. Now, look, if you want a copy of this, please let me know if you want the copy of these slides, if you're interested to have them and, you know, have the opportunity to look at them again. I'm not going to read these because I've only got a couple of minutes and I just want to see. This is actually a poem, a Zen poem of Chinyo Bhikkhuni, and this is again a teaching poem. One must bend in the floating world, snow on the bamboo, the passing year. Irritating things are also flowing water, cool, clear water, and fireflies that vanish. That's all there is. 100 different gourds from the mind of one vine. So again, pointing to emptiness and the impermanence